Of course, it wasn't that easy. Sheep shearing was a laborious process for the shearer and the sheep. And then you had to have someone with enough skill to turn all this raw wool into cloth. After cleaning the wool, it had to be carded. This took strong fingers and prickly brushes, like pet brushes, to untangle and separate the fibers, and to create wispy tubes of wool called slivers. You then stretch the slivers into yarn on a spinning wheel. Notice how the yarn gets twisted as it winds onto the spindle? This makes it strong enough to weave without breaking.
It doesn't completely block the river, but it raises the height of the water to create an elevated mill pond. Now, if we dig a channel called a head race from the pond to the mill, that pent-up water behind the dam will flow through the head race, turn the wheel, and then rejoin the river through the tail race.
So dams and their ponds acted like storage tanks for the H2O fuel the water wheel engines ran on. You can still find scores of mill dams all along New England's rivers. But this one in Pawtucket, Rhode Island is special because it powered America's very first spinning mill. People had used the turning force of water wheels to help with tough jobs like driving blades for sawing wood, and rotating coarse stones for grinding grain into flour. But eventually, water wheels began to power more complicated devices that would revolutionize cloth making, like this carding machine. What an improvement over the pet brushes. And by rolling out wispy slivers all day long, it was a great labor-saving device.
But this was even better. I'm standing next to a machine called a water frame. It was created by the famous English inventor Richard Arkwright, this model's from the 1780s, to spin cotton into yarn. Though it looks fairly complex, it really isn't.
It runs on water power, just like the carding machine and saw blades we saw earlier. The cotton in the top spools is drawn out by the action of the machine, which twists it nice and tight, and then gathers the yarn onto these bottom spools. It works just like a hand spinning wheel. 96 of them, actually. So it's little wonder that spinning by machine. Legend has it that in 1789, a young entrepreneur named Samuel Slater defied the laws of England by supervising the construction of English-style cotton spinning machinery at the mill in Pawtucket. England had tried to protect its fledgling monopoly on spinning machines with patents. But Slater, who worked in the mills, understood how to make similar machines and came to America to seek his fortune. The wheel is connected to revolving metal gears. And as the gears turn in rhythm with the wheel, they rotate a vertical pole called the main shaft. The main shaft rises through the ceiling and extends all the way to the top of the building.
On each floor, The vertical shaft turns horizontal shafts that hang just below the ceiling. A leather belt carries the power from those horizontal shafts to a pair of pulleys above each machine. Now, to get the power to the machine itself, I'm going to turn the machine on by sliding the belt from one pulley to another. And voila, the machine works. Now, this is not a spinning machine, it's a lathe. A lot of mills, like Wilkinson, had their own machine shops. This is a wood lathe. It was actually used to produce those humble workhorses of the spinning industry, the bobbin.
Yarn from the spinning machines was spooled onto bobbins. And in the beginning, that's all the textile mills produced, yarn. Societies that once responded to the rhythm of the sun and seasons now move to the beating of the clock.
You turn yarn into fabric on a loom, and this is a typical hand loom. Now, weaving was done by both men and women, so I should probably do okay at this. First of all, we have to set up the loom by drawing threads from the warp beam behind the loom across the top to another beam near my feet. The warp threads pass through harnesses, which I can raise or lower by pressing down on these foot pedals. And when I do that, it creates a space between alternating sets of warp threads. I'm going to take the shuttle, which is this wooden contraption with a spool of yarn in it called a bobbin, and I'm going to push it across through that space, perpendicular to the warp threads. I then press it down, change pedals to raise the other harness, to create that over and under pattern that you get used to seeing in weaving. I send the shuttle back through, pull it snug, tamp it down, and repeat this process over and over again until there's something else I'm supposed to do or my arms fall off. You can see just how much time is going to go into this to produce enough fabric to make clothes. I mean, there's the carding and the spinning and the weaving, then there's the cutting and the stitching and so on, which sort of explains why people back then would have had relatively few clothes. But by the middle of the 1700s, help was on the way.
This industrial revolution would bring giant factories and working classes, entrepreneurs and inventors, and an era we call mill times, yarn. But by the 1820s, inventors had finally figured out how to make machines that could take all those spools of yarn and weave them into cloth. This power loom is weaving a plain piece of fabric. All the things I had to do on the hand loom are now being performed by this machine, only a whole lot faster. In fact, the wooden shuttle I threw by hand whips its thread back and forth so quickly, we have to slow down the action for you to see it.
These looms could be very dangerous. If a shuttle like this should break free, it could pierce your flesh like a bullet. If you got your sleeve caught, it could cost you an arm. But when the power loom was perfected, weaving, like yarn spinning before it, would move from the home to the mill.
I know Daniel thinks I deserted him, but this mill represents the future far more than his.
Yes, children worked hard at Slater and at other mills throughout New England. They also worked on farms and in craft shops, just about everywhere. Few children had the luxury of going to school full-time, and working in the mills at least meant a decent place to eat and sleep. Though he ran a successful mill that bore his name, he was not the majority owner and felt he could do better with his own venture. And by mid-century, the Slater family had built 2 additional mills and installed steam engines to help power the machinery. Quarrybank Mill in England houses an early working model.
This remarkable contraption is an old steam engine. Look at the precise movement of the vertical piston. It's moved up and down by the rise and fall of steam pressure inside the cylinder. And that up and down motion is converted into rotary motion, which operates all the machines. This was a revolutionary device. It made it possible to run machines any time, any place, and in any kind of weather. Over the years, operators used both steam power and water power. But eventually, the steam engine replaced water wheels as the primary source of power for most mills.
With steam engines to run machinery, mills no longer had to be located near rivers. And once freed from the river, the stage was set for the demise of the New England mill. By the middle of the 20th century, many New England textile companies had moved south, where labor was cheap, where cotton grew right outside the door, and where swift-moving rivers no longer mattered. In more recent decades, the industry has moved to even cheaper labor markets in Asia and the Pacific. Today, the largest textile centers in the world lie far beyond the United States and Great Britain, leaving places like Slatersville abandoned and desolate. In England and New England, the textile industry is only a shadow of the enterprise it once was, and many old mills are now rotting from neglect or completely gone. A few communities have restored mill buildings, turning them into apartments, shopping malls, even art studios. But here in New England, the industry that supported generation after generation of working families is, for the most part, over. At their height, mills were criticized for bringing a decline in craftsmanship and a machine-like regimentation to the workplace. But they created enormous benefits as well. As anchors for cities, as innovators of new technologies, they put vast numbers of people to work and brought affordable products to consumers everywhere. For better or worse, mills have shaped our world and the way we live as surely as any force in history.